recorded at this point in time. And it should be understood that the recording is for informational purposes only and is not considered to be a public record. Okay, just so that you know, Christy, I see you're on. And who do we have on with the 508 phone number, please?
That's me, it's Amy.
Amy, great.
Yep.
Let me just confirm. Great. All right, and we may have to stop as people jump in just so we know who's here. But thank you everyone for joining. I think there's a lot of stuff going on since we met 9 days ago. Couple things that I just want to make sure we cover. I want to understand from Jill and Ryan where things are. I don't think the working group has met at least once at this point. And I've also been working with Peter on a few things about logistics for the school that we should talk to. Also shared a bunch of information. We got the survey results, which I'm sure we'll go over. And I also shared that Harvard School Public Health document with everybody. So hopefully you had a chance to take a look at that, and then we'll talk a little bit about that too. But to start with, I'm going to turn it over, Jill, to you and Ryan to sort of give us an update as to the state of the craziness. So
sure. We were thinking that it might help to start with the survey results first, and then speak to the progress we've made with the working group and with our administrative team to date. So I'm going to try to share my screen with everybody. Oh, I can't. The host has disabled screen sharing.
Oh, I have I? What a bad host. Let's see here. That should allow you to do it.
All right. Let's see.
And if that doesn't work, I can do it if you need me to. Want me to do it, Jill?
Yeah, do you mind?
Nope.
Sorry.
Nope, that's all right. I just want to make sure I'll do this.
Great.
I'm going to make it a little bigger here.
So I will begin while we can at least see the slides on the screen. The survey closed actually today at 12:30. Initially, people were asked to respond by 12, but because a meeting went over, for good fortune for some, we had a little bit of a buffer, and the survey didn't actually close until 12:30. The first thing that we're going to share are the Dennett Elementary parent intentions, and we call it the intention survey because we recognize that we just wanted to take a temperature of where people were at this point. It's non-binding, but give us a general sense of how people felt about some basic issues that would help us with our reentry plans. So on this first slide, you can see, first of all, we had 122 responses from our parents. For this particular question, 104 people answered this question. They could choose all of the grades that their students currently attend. So that's why you can see it goes all the way from pre-K to other, which you can see the majority of responses are within your K through 6 range for Dennett, with most of your Dennett parents having children in those grades, which makes sense. Next.
And I did do a little bit of math on that. That's 162 students in the Dennett that this survey covers based on this response here, which if there's 18 that skipped it, there's probably even more that this actually covers, which is 68%. That's huge. So I think that's a good thing.
So our next slide, when parents were asked if they currently plan to send their students to school in the fall, if school is offered in person daily on school site, 64.75% or 79 people said that yes, based upon the current circumstances, they would. Only 5.74% or 7 individuals responded that no, they wouldn't based upon the current circumstances. And 29.51% or 36 respondents said that they were undecided at this time. So if you plan to send your students to school in the fall, how do you plan to send them to school? This was to get a sense or a gauge on how many students of the respondents were planning on taking the bus. A little less than half, 45.76% of the respondents said that their students would take the bus. 53.39% would be the student would drive or be driven to school. And only one parent responded that their child would walk, bike, etc. So I don't know if that's in keeping with your perception, Pete, in particular, in terms of how it currently goes at your school, but I found it interesting that at about half would plan on taking the bus of the respondents.
That surprised me a little bit as well. We do have a fair number of drop-offs every day, but that was a much higher number than I think I was expecting.
So that's certainly something to think about as we plan for reentry, what that might look like in terms of drop-off, whether drop-offs would need to be staggered, whether or not, right now the guidance is about 1/3 of students. What we currently hold, we could hold under the current social distancing guidance. That would be with masks. And in addition, based upon further information today, siblings could sit in the same seat. So you could have 2 siblings in the same seat, which might help you to maximize space on a bus.
And that we did that equivalent at town meeting too. So household members could sit together in order to try and keep things a little more compact.
So how many of your students would take the bus under the current circumstances? Again, we were just trying to get a sense of how students could be grouped in terms of families. The majority of people are sending 1 to 2 students on the bus. Well, actually, the majority of people are saying no, they're not sending it at 46%. But then the next group, you're looking at people sending 1 to 2 children. We do have a few examples of 3 to 4 children that might be able to sit closer together. But one thing to keep in mind is that some of these siblings might be taking the bus to, let's say, the middle school, because these are Dennett parents who may have students in more than one school.
Right.
If given the choice regarding schooling next year under the current circumstances, what would you choose for your students? So again, we couldn't possibly think of every scenario. So what we tried to do to the best of our ability was to summarize, give little snapshots of some of the common hybrid scenarios and in-person scenarios, and then remote that were most commonly discussed, whether it be at administrative meetings, at the superintendent lighthouse, with the commissioner, or things that other principal groups had been discussing. So the first option was in-person learning at 3 feet distancing. 42% or 51 respondents said that they would send their children back to school at 3 feet social distancing. The second choice was in-person learning at 6 feet distancing and possibly attending school on alternating days. That slightly edged out in-person learning at 6 feet distancing and possibly attending school on alternating weeks, and online learning, so just full remote. The final choice was in-person learning at 6 feet and possibly only attending a half a day, so splitting the students possibly in half or only going for half a day, only 9% or 11 respondents would have chosen that. And again, we recognize that our description of these possible scenarios was limited, but we wanted to try to get a sense of what parents may prefer. So it gives us some insights to our community. Any questions there?
Just on the half a day, Jill.
Yep.
That plan doesn't mean that you would try and have a second cohort of students in the same day, does it?
No, I think, you know, the intention is to send them home at a half day to limit contact at lunchtime where it's more difficult to wear masks. But again, I can't speak to how people may have filled out the survey or how they might have perceived it. You know, it's not a scientific measure. It was more of a temperature check. But that's certainly something that if we're interested in, we'd have to be more clear on in terms of intentions if we decide to pursue that route.
Right, because just because of the way you described it there, if it was having a second cohort of students come in the afternoon, that would completely be off the table for me. But if it meant potentially sending kids home with a bagged lunch, sort of like what we're doing now during the remote, just to
Make
have
sure they,
contact time, I would be in favor of it. So thank you for explaining that.
yep. Concerns, and again,
Go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry,
Sure.
Mike.
Sorry, I have a question. Where did the 3 feet rule come in? Where did that come from?
So the 3 feet guidance came from the Department of Education, and there was a big push to try to get as many students back to school as possible. And so they looked at some data, and they're going to be providing us supposedly this week with a video from the American Pediatric Society and the experts that they have been working with.
So are they not going with the CDC guidelines anymore? Is that what they're doing, or?
They have both in their guidance. I think the big push was to try to get, again, from a statewide perspective, one of the concerns is the ability to bring as many kids back to school as possible.
No, I understand that. My concern is they've had the 6 feet rule for months now, and I can tell you that in our organization that is working, and it has worked since we've been doing it. If the CDC doesn't change that, I would think that you would see breakouts in the system with a 3 foot rule.
And why don't we do this? Why don't we get through the survey, and then we're gonna have lots of talk all about this stuff. And I have a lot of very strong opinions about this and what I would even vote for as well. And I think we should have a good, robust discussion, because this is also about us as a school committee being able to give Jill and Ryan some feedback to help them build the plan for the Dennett, and to what extent that provides feedback as well to the plan for Silver Lake as a whole. But you know, this is, I think we were required to take a look at 3 feet and 6 feet as part of the guidance from DESI. I'm probably in agreement with at least folks that have spoken so far. I am in agreement that 3 feet for me is off the table. I also don't think people understand what 3 feet is. 3 feet is not much different than what we were doing in a classroom. We didn't have kids sitting right next to one another because they'd be touching one another all the time. So we had separation of the desks. And when you look at some pictures of what 3 feet looks like in a classroom, it doesn't look any different. And I think at 3 feet, we could put all the students back in the Dennett. I'm just not sure we should. So we'll get to that. But now that I've gone off on a tangent, I'm going to be quiet, and let's get through the survey, and then we can move through and have these discussions. Really important, I think. Okay.
So then some general concerns, and again, we did not have an opportunity to painstakingly go through all of the qualitative data, given the fact that it closed at 12:30, and that I had a 1 o'clock meeting, a 4 o'clock meeting, and then school committee. So to pretend that I have done a great job of vetting all of this qualitative data, or that Ryan has had a chance to, would be misleading. We have quickly read through all of the qualitative data and attempted in in quick fashion so that we could share some insights with you tonight, have quickly put together some bullet point items. And our hope is to be able to share the exact statements exactly as they read. But we need to go through and scrub the data to make sure there's no identifying information about any children, because that would be a violation of FERPA for our students. Now, we didn't ask any private questions, but every now and then you'll get a parent who will refer to a child by name or a particular circumstance that could be identifying. At first glance, that first read, I don't believe we have any data that can't be shared. So, but again, we went through it quickly.
And thank you for being so responsive to get this in here. I think it's really great for us to be able to see this, and will inform the discussion. So I appreciate the disclaimer, but I think this is absolutely correct to get what we could get out and share that so we can have that to inform our discussions tonight.
So some of the concerns from our parents, obviously safety, health risks, and the ability of children to comply with whatever safety measures we put in place, which is all very understandable. And I think at the forefront of many people's minds. In particular, there was concerns about the difficulty of wearing a mask, especially for young children. And then there was also concern about whether or not we'd have enough staff who were willing to come back to work during this time. There was, in terms of remote learning, their concerns, parent concerns, seem to focus on the quality of remote learning. And that's not an unfamiliar theme to us. That echoes a lot of the feedback we got in June. They're concerned about the loss of social interaction, and they would very much like their children to be able to socially interact safely. And with remote education, that's less likely, or to occur less frequently, I guess is the best way to describe it. Some parents express their inability to work with children at home, and that's a real source of stress for them. And then there was also the concern that remote just can't replace the in-person learning and the potential loss of academic content and those types of concerns. Sorry. Some of the ideas that we have not discussed as regularly from that qualitative data, people reflecting upon outdoor opportunities when weather is permitting. Making sure that we instruct students on safety measures. For example, how to safely wash their hands, how to make sure that they're wearing their mask correctly. And parents also really wanted us to focus on consistency in scheduling, so that there was a routine or an expectation, regardless of what model we have in place. So the next section deals with staff responses. And so the first is just a breakdown of who is responding to the survey, and the majority of the Dennett staff respondents were in fact teachers. Teachers were 60%, or 15 teachers responded to the survey. There were 5 paraprofessionals, 1 non-teaching staff, 1 counselor, school psychologist, and 3 that characterize themselves as other.
This is an incredibly high participation rate. I mean, it's almost everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's great. That's excellent. It's excellent.
So our teachers said that yes, 72%, or 18 of our teachers said yes, based upon the current circumstances, they plan to return to school in the fall in person. 1 person said no, based upon the current circumstances, and 6 said that they were undecided. When they were asked what their preferred school model would be for the fall, whether it be remote, in person, or a hybrid, you can see that the majority would prefer at this time, 36% or 9 prefer a hybrid with some remote and some in person. 24% or 6 teachers preferring remote, and only 10 preferring no, I did that wrong. I'm sorry. I apologize. The majority of respondents said, 10 respondents said that they'd prefer in person, with hybrid a second, and 24% or remote coming in last. I apologize. If given the choice regarding school next year under the current circumstances, what would you prefer? Most preferred, number 1, which contradicts the previous slide, which may have led to my confusion, but because we broke it down into so many categories, it's not necessarily conflicting. The majority of respondents either prefer in-person learning at 3 feet or remote. So you've got 12 of your respondents in that category. The next would be in-person learning at 6 feet distancing for a half-day session.
I would argue that you really roll up the 6 feet and the 3 feet just to get a sense, because it was so broken out, and that's where you see that sort of smattering of results. But if you're looking at to answer the question of 3 feet versus 6 feet versus remote, you clearly have a preference for 6 feet, and then a split between 3 and remote. And we can talk more about that, but my guess is that it's not fully understood what 3 and 6 means, right, what it looks like in the classroom. So,
greatest concerns regarding in-person learning for the fall. And this was a scale question, and the next slide will be a breakdown of how that scale score was arrived at. But the number 1 concern for teachers was safety protocols. The second concern was how to support them socially and emotionally. So here you can see how the scores were derived, because 1 was had the greatest weight, or meaning it was your greatest concern. So safety protocols, 17 teachers, or 73.91% of teachers said that was their greatest concern. That's how you can read that data across. The second highest concern at 13.04%, or 47.83%, ranking at number 2, was social emotional needs. So the combination, the ranking of 1, 2, and 3 led to the score of a 4.39 for social emotional supports. So that's how that previous chart is calculated.
and then the other 3 all pretty much have the same score.
Yes.
For that score, so it's all pretty balanced.
Mm-hmm. So we also asked them what their greatest concerns were regarding online learning. And again, if you look at their scores to the side, their greatest concern was how to effectively engage students online. That's not really a surprise, given that it's very difficult, especially with students who may be less independent, but certainly not their traditional mode of teaching. And then the second greatest concern, once again, whether it be online or in person, is how to support their students socially and emotionally. And then probably third would be closing potential learning gaps. So this is just that same data just played out in a bar graph so that you can see the top 2 areas of concern is how to effectively engage them online and how to support them socially and emotionally. So concerns and recommendations from our teachers. And again, this was qualitative data that we tried to summarize as quickly as possible. But among their concerns are making sure that we have clear guidance with regards to safety protocols. They recommended phased reopening. They also recommended that we make a decision as soon as possible, because they recognize how much work it's going to take to put any of these plans into place, and to do so in a safe and effective way. In terms of their training needs or supports, in particular, and there were calls for helping to teach more effectively online, training with regards to specific tools, focus on how to support students socially and emotionally. The good news is about a year and a half to 2 years ago, we started a conversation with our building principals about trying to be more consistent in our approach to social emotional learning, but also in our anti-bullying curriculum. And in our need to create consistency across our schools, we have been looking at a number of different social emotional and anti-bullying curriculum. And this spring, Melissa, Ryan, principals, and teachers finalized that work. They were able to review some programs, and they will have resources that will support teachers not only in person for social emotional learning, but also online. So that's one thing that we already have secured and have already started to work with staff on. And then finally, the need obviously for safety procedures. And that would be not only for teachers, but for students as well, and to educate our parents. They are looking for, some of them are looking for additional online tools and support in particular so that they can be more effective. And then social emotional resources, which I mentioned when I talked about training. So for us, in terms of the survey data, we were interested to see how the numbers would work out because certainly some of that information will be very helpful to us in terms of whether or not we see a certain model as feasible at this time. Ryan and I can give you a quick brief overview before we start to talk to speak to some of the more in-depth issues that we know you want to talk about. We did meet Tuesday with our elementary working group as well as with our secondary workout group. We gave them an overview of the state initial guidance. We asked them in their breakout group to think creatively outside the box. We broke them into smaller groups so that everybody had the opportunity to speak and then to put their ideas into a shared document. Different groups got to different places based upon how far in depth they went into a particular model. And so Ryan has been working on putting all of that information together into one cohesive document for our elementary working group. Christine has been working with the bus company to look at the maximum number of students and different possibilities or the cost for potential additional runs should they become necessary. In terms of lunches, we have been focused on trying to consider ways to provide lunches in either in person in open spaces that we may not be able to utilize in ways that we have in the past, or we're looking at grab and go, or we're looking at early release and grab and go so that all of our students have an opportunity for lunch. So lunch is a part of that as well. We talked a lot about, to the best of our ability, we would love to be able to provide as much choice as possible, not only for our students, but also for our staff. We just don't know what the actual commitment numbers will be. And we think one of the things that we'll need to decide upon is whether or not when we ask teachers to make a commitment and parents to make a commitment. And if so, how long will that commitment be? Will that be a trimester? Will that be a semester? Will that be for the year? Will that be every X number of weeks? Again, that's something to consider as well. The need for safety training has been discussed, and additional safety guidance and training is coming. In June, we had our nurses to put together some initial training guidance for our staff, and we anticipate that our school nurses will play an important role in training not only our staff, but also helping to help educate our students and families as well. One of the things that we need to think about is that whatever we do for remote, we do in person, or we do in hybrid, there needs to be a continuity between those schedules so that we can move in and out of them as seamlessly as possible. And it also helps to maintain that sense of normalcy and routine for our students as well. There needs to be a continuum because none of us know for certain how and when we'll need to move from one mode to another. So we may all have a hope of how we return, or hope of where we'll be at a certain point in the year, but none of us can give that guarantee. And none of us know for certain, unfortunately. We would love to have those knowns, but we're working with so many unknowns that we need to make sure that these 3 plans can interlock and that we can change at any point as seamlessly as possible. There's a lot of concern about how and if, to what extent, how do we get to a point where we can enforce masks? Will children and staff be required to produce a medical note if in fact they're not able to wear a mask? These are the types of questions that are concerning. To what extent can we rely upon our community to support the effort and encourage children to wear masks? And there are a lot of questions around masks. One of the things that we also need to consider is that school will look very, very different in person. Because we are going to be asking people to be in rows, socially distanced, and that we're also asking our schools to limit movement, to try to limit contact as well. So all of the brain-based research that we've done and all of the things that we know are good for children and learning, such as, working in smaller groups that might require movement, or brain breaks and moving about, those kinds of things. Here we're going back to what on the surface looks like a very traditional model. And on the one hand, we need to do that for safety. On the other hand, we need to find other ways that are safe to engage kids and make sure that learning is fun, relevant, and not scary. And that was something that we talked about as well. We talked about the potential need to emphasize certain core subjects if necessary. And what did we mean by that? Well, some of the concerns, and we anticipate further guidance, there are some subjects, not that we don't honor those disciplines, but there are some subjects that may be better taught remotely. So for example, if your child is in band and plays a wind instrument, or physical education may need to become health and wellness with perhaps a physical activity log and done remotely. That would also free up certain spaces that, should we decide to serve lunches during the school day, we would have more space to do so and more safely. So I have gone over some big ticket items, and I'm sure Ryan has some other things that he may want to add to that, but we wanted to give you a general overview of the types of things that were discussed and the concerns that we had.
Okay. Ryan, did you have anything you wanted to add to that at the moment, or we'll just keep going and we'll throw things in?
No, I think Jill did a good job. And just we're compiling the data from the working group. There were 4 educators of 24 from Dennett on the working group, so everyone's represented. So we'll keep you updated with that. There's another meeting Friday, but I think Jill hit all the big points. Lots of variation in the data, lots of Jill's slide hit it, but I was just really struck by facilities concerns, surface cleaning as of the transmission way, and other people talked about the mask. So there's just a wide range of what concerns people was my only additional takeaway.
So why don't I start this off and see where we go with it. I think I know that this is a requirement from DESE that we have to submit these 3 plans. I'll just toss it out there, and I'm sure that will get the discussion going. The first plan, of course, is everybody comes into school, which I guess we could do at 3 feet, but just because we can doesn't mean we should. I am not in favor of 3 feet. I understand where some of the discussion comes from that, and it's also based on some of what's gone on in Europe. But having people that I know are there and who have provided me with firsthand information, that's not here. And even though Massachusetts is doing a really good job right now, it still has a ways to go. The governor has added additional testing sites because there were some little spikes and we started to creep up again, and that's great. But I think we're still at a 2 and change positivity rate and compare that to some of the countries in Europe and what they were doing there, it's not quite aligned. I think the other issue that we have is that the sort of idea that kids don't get it and don't transmit it is based on a Korean study that just came out, a significant amount of, I think 60,000 people they looked at. That tends to be apparently a little bit more true for under 9, but not over 9. And so that changes it. And I guess the third piece I toss to that is that I totally understand the issues and the concerns of parents trying to work. I have a number of my colleagues that are doing it, and I get to see some really cute kids during the day as we're on some of the Zoom meetings. And it's really, really hard. But if we don't do this right, we're going to be back to remote learning for everybody, you know, and we're going to, or at least chunks of the school. And when you get to the issue of, we want consistency in how we're planning it, right? So if we're on 1 week and off 1 week per cohort of students, you know, if we have a outbreak within the school, then either that grade is shut down and everyone's home for 2 weeks, and now that throws off the planning. So it's, you know, I think we have to be cautious, in my opinion, simply because not doing so, one, is not good for the health of students, our teachers, families, and the community, but two, it could actually cause more if we do too much too quickly. So I'll stop on the 3. So I guess part of that is I hope we're not spending too much time other than to demonstrate why it's not particularly practical, even though it's probably more practical at the Dennett than it is anywhere else in the district, why it's not practical given costs. And, you know, and even if you get everyone there, you got to get them there. And we know that it's not going to be 50 kids on a bus. And that becomes those are costs that I think would be difficult to justify to the town as to why we're spending it. Like if we doubled our bus runs and all of a sudden have $100 grand more of a bill, versus we needed to add additional filtration, we needed to add additional servicing, and we're going to have higher electric bills because of making sure we have fresh air coming in the building. That's probably easier. So I'll toss it out to the other committee members if they want to comment on that piece of it.
John, I have a few comments. First, Jill and Ryan, thank you for putting the survey together. I know that's a lot of work to do all that. Now, to get the school ready is a huge task. I've been dealing with this in my work since it started. I've gone into several buildings and reset them for the social distancing. 3 feet is not going to work. We don't require, if we go with the 6 foot distancing, the people that work there don't have to wear a mask. But if they get into close areas after that, everybody is required to put a mask on. We have some folks that can't wear a mask because of breathing issues, so they wear a face shield. We've measured out every area where a worker would be standing. We've used social distancing round stickers on the floor so that everybody's aware of it. We have sanitizing stations set up where there's hand sanitizer, spray chemicals, masks, gloves, shields. It's all there for them. So when they come in or when they leave to go out, what is the plan to get the school to that level? Because I can just tell you right now, it's a lot of work and it's tiresome, because you have to keep up with everything. You have to keep up with all the inventory of all your products, so you don't run low. Who's mixing the chemicals? Who's cleaning the building at nighttime? Who's cleaning the building in the morning? What are the teachers? Are they going to be required to clean everything as students leave? The whole bus thing's a total different issue. You know, we have offices where the area is too small and we have to stagger the start times because we can't let everybody in the building all at the same time. It just doesn't work. So half the crew comes in, they do everything, they leave, the second half comes in. So it turns into longer days. It's very, I can tell you firsthand, it's a very stressful situation. And I'm just concerned. I don't know where Desi is getting this 3 feet thing. As a member, I'm not in support of that. So it's got to be 6 feet or more. I just got done setting up an office now, and we went over the 6 feet. We went almost 8 feet, just to have a little bit of a buffer, so that we don't have any issues. We have people in place where if there is a known, that somebody's been known to be with somebody that could have been with somebody else, that we report it and we take down as much information as we can. Most of those folks, they will go and get a COVID test, and then they're self-quarantined for 14 days. So what do we do then with the teachers? There's so many moving parts with this. It's just incredible. We have I think about 16,000 people that are in our division here, and because we've really pushed these practices, we've only had a little over 200 cases, and unfortunately there's been a few deaths, but the numbers for us have been pretty low. And the numbers that we saw the numbers spike when people weren't following the guidelines. In Boston, there was a whole group of guys, they forgot, they take their breaks all together, and now they're all in a big cluster, and they all got infected, and then they infected other people in there, and they had to close down different areas. We've had plexiglass put into places, so you have that barrier. I don't know if it's worth getting everybody in like a few days before, so we can kind of go through these procedures with everybody, so everybody's aware of what's happening. We talk about it every single day. Every day it's talked about, because people forget. They just think, oh, nothing's happening, so we're okay, but it's not. We just had a person who was in contact. Her husband was in contact with a coworker, and they all got tested, and thankfully everything came back negative. But these people, they weren't working for 14 days. So I would like to hear more about the setup of the building, because that's a huge concern. For me, it is, anyways.
So there will be a facilities subcommittee that will branch off after the general creation of the plans. But to say that we have been considering safety equipment since before the closure of school is one thing, because we've placed some orders, but we also recognize that some pieces of equipment or some orders may be difficult to obtain in a timely fashion, despite the fact that some of these items were ordered at the end of last school year, or some items as early as I think it was April or May. We also have a facilities director now who is also part of the working group. So he is also aware of the DESE guidance. And as part of the plan, there will be protocols that and expectations ultimately that will have to be met. But for this first phase, our plan does not have to be to that level of detail. Again, I haven't submitted this, or nor has Ryan submitted the second level of detail, so we don't consider ourselves experts in any way. But the other thing is that the commissioner today, in one of the Zoom meetings that I had today, he did say, and this is, I don't mean to say this like, oh, good, we're all set now, because I don't mean to imply that. But he is backing off of the 180 days and saying 175 days, which would give us 5 days for training or for setting up. But again, we would like to start this process sooner rather than later, before even teachers come back. But we'll have a better sense of what we need as we continue to work and put together these plans. The building principals will play a key role in setting up and helping to set up the details for their building. So there are building specific details that the building principals will play a key role in helping to facilitate and helping to help us to ensure that certain things are done, such as, the signage. We will help coordinate or make sure that certain minimal expectations are met in terms of training days and common training. And we're going to be working together more district-wide on those types of things. But each building has its unique needs. And so one of the things that Ryan talked to Matt Durkee about today was really starting to think about, and again, he's been thinking about this prior to that, but we keep going back to these items because we need to find out from each building, are there any rooms that don't have windows? Are there any ventilation systems that are not up to, the state guidance levels, if not better? And if we can make them better, how can we make them better? Those types of questions. Ryan had that conversation today with Matt. And we had given him guidance earlier, but we're also trying to, work in as many directions as possible, not only on reentry plans, but on safety plans, on facility plans, on negotiations. And we don't just do this for one school district, we have 4 in reality. So it gets a little crazy, but it's coming together.
Oh, so it's definitely going to be crazy. It's a tremendous amount of work and an undertaking. I'm just speaking from experience. It's crazy.
Mike,
Yes.
tomorrow night I'm leading a workshop on the 2-step process that Desi's laid out. And part of that is the feasibility study. And the feasibility study is what you're talking about right now. And 3 feet is the minimum that the state has set up, but we don't have to go to that minimum. We can have local controls over what we feel our baseline should be for it. So I know John said it and I've heard you say it and I'll say it too. 6 feet is my baseline. I won't go below that and support any plan that doesn't use 6 feet as our baseline.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just telling you, if we didn't do the 6 feet, we would have more cases. I'm just saying.
Have we determined how many kids we can fit in a classroom if we do 6 feet?
15.
15. I mean, at the Dennett, that would be most of the classrooms.
Yeah, but
Except probably kindergarten and first grade is probably the 2 that are going to be difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, if this was a couple years ago, we probably could get every class in there fully. We're probably over on more than not at this point. But the other piece is as we go through it and as we actually implement for the Dennett, just because we can put 15 in the classroom doesn't mean we should. So we'll need to just think about it, and we'll need to figure out also, I think part of the complexity here is going to be a need base too, that there are going to be certain students who really need to be there every day, or it's better for them to be there every day versus other students who could go in a week on, a week off. Ryan, did you want to say something?
I was just going to add in terms of the planning piece that Mike's referring to and who can fit. I think the data points to not necessarily a square footage challenge, but a staffing challenge. And that's another place where we have to potentially, work with the school to put our minds around, because there's a little bit of reluctance, understandably so, on the part, more so on staff's part than family's part. So even if we could fit everyone, I'm not sure we can staff it just based on the way the data is pointing. It's not, like Jill said, it's just intent at this point, but I think that's another part of the puzzle is how to staff.
Peter?
Yeah, I can assure you that I've been thinking about this every minute that I've been awake since March 13th. So what typically what happens in the summertime as the rooms are cleaned out, waxed, and all that, they're put back the way that they were. What we're trying to do right now is maximize every possible square foot. The best number we can do at a 6 foot distance is 15 desks, and that's taking out some potentially unnecessary furniture and putting it in storage, which will most likely be on the stage. The conversations that I've had with Matt around HVAC, around even with Megan today about, 6-foot spacing at lunch. What does that look like? Do we have enough furniture? Do we have enough people to cover lunches? Do we have, these are all definitely things that we're considering. And I think we have a lot of relatively intelligent people working on it. So if it turns out that 6-foot boundary needs to be 6 feet, that's kind of the number that I'm using as classrooms are being put back together. And even considerations like things in the kindergarten room that I just can't have in there anymore. I can't have a Lego table in a kindergarten room at this point. And some of the things that were shared items, we're literally going room by room and saying, no, that can't be there. We can't have that right now. So as detail oriented as possible without a formal reentry plan, that has been my driving thought every single day.
And I would note that, Peter and I have exchanged a couple of emails because we started poking at the HVAC stuff last week. I do have an email I can share with you guys regarding the AC system. We need to get a little more detail with respect to the heating system. I think it's a little bit different, but at least for Dennett, I think for the re-entry, in the warmer weather, with some tweaks and changes to the existing system, it's probably as good as you can get, particularly for a 20-year-old building. We have individual units that feed AC into each of the classrooms. You can adjust the amount of fresh air versus not fresh air. There's also filters there for the classroom air that comes back in. These are going to have costs, like for the filters. I would bet we're going to blow our utility budget, but that is to me, that is a reasonable thing to not. I'm not worrying about that right now. We've got to make the right choices to make this as safe as possible. And when you look at things like the Harvard study that I sent around to you, these are the types of things they're talking about to mitigate risk. There will be risk to have students in the building and teachers in the building. There's no zero risk. Zero risk is remote learning. Okay, that's full remote all year. That's zero risk for health and safety. It's a huge risk for educational quality and especially for certain students that absolutely need some one-on-one instruction. So we have to balance that. But I think as we work, all of us work together and we take different pieces of this and we work through it, we're going to go and address and we're going to do the best we can for September 1st, whatever the date is, to be there. And then I am going to challenge us and Ryan's heard this from me, so he's going to start rolling his eyes soon. But I challenge us. This is agile, okay? And that's big business speak which means that you come up with a plan, and you constantly reassess it. And we have to do that because this is going to be a moving situation. We need to do what's best for everyone. And if our plan in December looks like it did in September, we probably didn't do our job. So, but I think it's really important for us in these places where we can make small incremental changes to greatly reduce risk, we should be doing it. And so I'll send a copy of that email around. I think there's a lot of positive stuff there. The other thing I'll toss out there is that, just so folks know where I am so we can throw it out there and people can talk. I am strongly in favor of making sure that we get people in there, that we get people who we need to get into the school, and that we provide some relief to families, particularly those that really need to have their kids in school for any number of reasons. And that we do the best we can from an educational perspective for the entire school. But I also want to make sure that we don't end up having to shut things down. To me, that is the worst outcome if we're able to open up and we go fine, and all of a sudden in October we have to shut the school down for 2 weeks. That's chaotic for everybody. So I think we should be looking at keeping the whole concept of pods or capsules. We should be keeping students together and not mixing with other students. We probably need to think about the staff. The staff should not be necessarily using the staff room there because they're probably the greater spreaders of the potential there. I don't think we should be serving lunch in a cafeteria. I think the lunch should come to the classroom. I think the kids should go outside. I think the kids should go outside if it's raining. I think we need to look at the European model of that. My cousin runs a kindergarten in Norway, and we were there looking, showing us around, and in the room where they have a whole room, like a locker room, that is for when they come into school and take off their clothes and when they go out for recess. And the teachers go out in, you know, -10-degree weather with the students in the snow, because that's what everyone does. So I think we should get the kids outside when we can get them out there. The Harvard report speaks to that too. It's good for them. It gets them a break, and it's a safer way to do it. But we have to think about how we execute that, because I don't want them all running through the hall together. So, you know, I think these are the types of things where we can do it. And this is probably the finer points, which is not what we need to get done for next Friday, which is this issue. But these are things we should be thinking about as school committee members, and trying to make sure we can do the best we can with the Dennett and keep it safe. All right, I get all wound up. Other people's thoughts?
I can also give you some insights from the commissioners meeting today as well, that are kind of finer grained, but something to be aware of in terms of, we haven't done a lot of speaking to the issue of high need students, whether it be special education, 504 plans, English language learners, and the expectation or the priority to try to allow these students to attend school, whether it be every day or every in-person day. So that was one of the things that was discussed today. Also, because of the way that it impacts our staffing, the commissioner also mentioned that schools are going to be, I don't know the exact words because none of this is in writing yet. So what I have learned is that until it's in writing, I don't know that it's really going to happen. But the idea that, and even then it's usually just guidance, but the idea that the children of staff would be allowed to attend school so that teachers could teach. And whether that be our schools or even daycare centers, they would be given priority as well, so that we can have more people returning to the workforce.
Yeah, I was going to actually speak to that, Jill, so I'm glad that you brought it up. I think everybody on the committee who's been here for a while knows. And do you go by Dan or Daniel?
Either one's fine.
All right.
I usually go by Dan.
All right, so Dan, I'm pretty vehemently opposed to school choice on its face. When we do school choice, we don't get any choice over who comes to our school. It's a lottery, and we receive about $5,000 for that student, and we typically spend about $12,000 per pupil here in Plimpton. So we have done it in the past to fill some small class sizes, but this is a different situation. If we can, all the different schools on the South Shore are not going to necessarily come up with the same plan that Plimpton comes up with, that Silver Lake comes up with. So we might have staff members whose children are in a drastically different schedule than our own. So in this circumstance, just with the uniqueness of the situation, if that's one less thing that a staff member has to worry about is where their kids are, what their kids are doing, I would absolutely be in favor of taking students at the Dennett and not doing it through school choice, because then we wouldn't have to put ourselves into that jeopardy of the lottery system, and especially with the commissioner supporting it. But I would also do it with the caveat that if they bring any kids during this situation, we continue with those kids and we'd allow their siblings to come as well, just for continuity of the family and continuity of their education.
I was going to say, I have all sorts of things to talk about, but I'm not going to monopolize everything if folks have other things they want to bring up.
John,
Well,
I have another.
Go ahead,
sorry,
Mike.
Jake. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. I just had another thought. So when we send the message out to the families when we're returning, I think, I mean, this is my opinion, that it should be added in there that we need everybody's help and support, and they need to be responsible because it's everybody in the community, and we need to keep everyone safe. Another thought came to my mind that if somebody knows something that somebody's been around, you know, not personal information, but talking families, that they really should reach out to Peter or Jill or Ryan. Just to, the more information that we can gather when something happens helps a ton. I can just tell you that it helps a ton. So I don't know if that's something to think about. Peter, thank you for you thought of all the stuff that I was just thinking about when you were talking about the stuff you don't need in the rooms. I can't tell you how much stuff we've moved out of the areas because first of all, we have to, and then we looked at it and said, you know, we don't need it, and we can keep everybody safe. So thank you for doing that. I know what you're doing it's a lot of work. So thank you.
Jason?
Yeah, and I know we're working on, you know, the draft right now for next Friday submission, and a lot of it is 300 or 400 word maximums for your explanation of what's going on. So I really appreciate you guys going into a little bit more depth into what you're thinking at this point. And I appreciate the fact that we're looking at trying to meet those high need learners as outlined by the commissioner in person, regardless of how we end up coming back to school and what model we're using, to try and get as many touch points with those kids, even if it means daily for those students, to try and help them out. John, I do hear what you're saying about trying to, if we're going to keep the kids in school all day, trying to get them outside, and also not adding that extra transition down to the lunchroom. I guess I'm a little bit more going at this from a cautious science perspective, and I would prefer to try and get as much learning in and send them home with that bagged lunch, and maybe have another touch point online with their teachers. Maybe it be an office hour or something where they check in, maybe do some direct instruction, or maybe just do some academic support in the afternoon. But I do appreciate that you reached out to the teachers and you asked them how they were feeling. And you're going to try and make sure we honor to the best of our ability the request of parents, students, and staff members. So thank you for your work. My support is behind the plan as it stands so far. Thank you.
Other thoughts? One thing that I wanted to sort of bring up here, and it sounds like a bit of a broken record, but I do think that Harvard paper was quite something. You know, I think that they highlighted, they really kind of went through and nailed all of the sort of big issues and had good recommendations. Some of them aren't necessarily germane to what we're doing. But one of the things that did stand out to me, and again, these are these places where I'm trying to say, is there incremental spending that we can do and perhaps even get fully reimbursed for it that can make things just a little bit safer? And that whole section that they have in there about how you're going to manage the bathrooms, right? Because you don't have a bathroom in each room, and even if we do, that poses cleaning issues, right? And I assume that we do not have automatic soap dispensers and paper towel holders in the bathrooms. That's probably a little pre. And I'm not sure we even have full toilet seats. And these are little things. And who knows? You might not even be able to get this stuff right now. But I think these are some of the things that, even though this is about sort of more like, that's more about August, we probably need to think about right now, and start, you know, it's funny, I go, because, you know, anytime I go into a public bathroom and those things aren't there, at this point I'm like, what's going on? You know, because they've been in my buildings at my employer for 15 years or more, right? It's just like how we still have keys, and I see and I've been using card readers for almost 30 years in the working world, and we still are using keys at the school because we haven't gotten to that point of dealing with it. But this is one of those things, one of those little things that I think helps us, because any place where these students are going to have some cross-contamination, I think we need to take every step we can within reason and a reasonable budget to do some addressing of it. and at least be thinking about what the costs are, and then I can work with the town about, because any costs that we have here, we don't have room in our budget. The only thing we have is that we're holding on the music teacher at the moment, and that's 20 grand.
Yeah.
So that's not much money, but my guess is that this could be easily put that way, that some of this stuff could be COVID related, and for whatever the next round of funding available through Plymouth County and CARES that we could access. We certainly, as a town, we did not access the full 130,000 that was put aside for us. So hopefully there will be money available to be able to address some of these things. But these are some of the things that we're going through, and hopefully that's helpful. And Peter, I'm not sure if we forwarded that to Matt. That probably would be good for him to take a look at too if he hasn't seen that report. And there's actually a site in that report to another organization that has a apparently very, I haven't clicked on that yet. For some reason I had to do real work today too, that they pay me for. But there's a link there, I think, to a much more detailed facilities recommendations, which might be really useful for him. Not that he isn't already thinking about a lot of this stuff. So I'll just toss that out too.
Well, using a little bit of foresight at the outset of this whole closure, we were able to put hand sanitizing dispensers outside of every single learning space in the building. So that there was a decent start. It's not a solution, but it's a.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think that's great. And as I said, I think the way the building was designed, we have some additional benefits there.
Yes.
And it's just a matter of evaluating the specifics against what the recommendations were in that report. You know, that's one of the things. It's like some of them say, yes, okay, you may be able to take the air out and put the air in, but are those two things far enough apart? You know, these are little things that you might not think about. So if you just, okay, we're kicking more air out and taking more fresh air in, but if you're mixing it, it's not good. But it sounds like we have some good stuff going on there.
John, since you brought up bathrooms, one of the recommendations for urinals is, since it really put a lid on a urinal, is to almost simulate negative pressure like they have in ICU rooms, and to make sure that you have a high cubic foot capacity ventilation that's constantly running in the bathrooms to suck the air out of the building.
Right.
It's another way to look at the bathroom issue.
Right.
I also heard an interesting thing about just a way to tie classes together. It's an electronic pass, and it just shows up on a desktop where teachers know if other students from other classes are out at the bathroom at any given time. I don't know if it's just a piece of software, and I don't know if it's be more cumbersome than it's worth, but I know other people are struggling with the same things we're struggling with right now. I have about 35 emails from school committee members across the Southeast who are asking for technical assistance just as they wrap their heads around the same thing we're trying to wrap our heads around.
So, let's see. Yeah, and there was some also, in that thing, there were some good recommendations about the bus and about how to load the bus, and therefore how to be able to perhaps get a couple more kids on there safely, not just packing them in. And then the other thing, Jason had shared with me some pictures from another school district regarding the whole 3 foot, 6 foot thing. And you know, depending on where we go, that may be something worth simulating here as well. Because if you look at some of the images, I mean, you look at 3 feet and it doesn't look like any difference. I mean, it's like, okay, as I said, it looks like Friday on the commuter rail on a bus. So there's still plenty of people on there, but they're just not as many. Whereas 6 foot is a big change. So I think that's all good. Any more thoughts on the remote learning piece of that? I know that was I mean, clearly we see it in this survey, we saw it in the last survey, and we talked a fair amount about it the last week. Clearly that's sort of our cornerstone of this whole thing, because we will be doing some remote learning, period. So any other thoughts initially from the working group on that?
So we had done some preliminary work looking at some online platforms, and the one that stood out, but we did not make any commitment to was Schoology, in part because we didn't know the expense and where we would be and whether or not we thought the benefits warranted the expense. It's on our agenda for tomorrow morning to discuss with our principals, particularly our elementary principals, because it would help facilitate communication perhaps better than, well, many people seem to think, because they know the difference because they've participated in the demo and they've been using Google Classroom, but better than just a Google Classroom platform. So that's one thing that we'll talk about tomorrow. Another thing on our agenda is the e-hall pass. And again, but our focus has been typically for high school and middle school. That's where typically you see a lot of that use of that software, but it's on our agenda to discuss it with all principals tomorrow. So it should be interesting to see where the principals stand with the use of that type of a device to help. It also helps with tracing because it gives you a picture of where people were at certain times of the day. And it can also let you see, from my understanding, how many students may already be out on a particular pass at that time. So it's one of many potential tools that could help us. The other issue that came up today that is perhaps more expensive and a bigger issue for the school committee to consider was the recommendation from the commissioner today for bus monitors. And again, I don't even know how likely we would be able to hire a bus monitor. Who would want to be a bus monitor under the current conditions? But he's made that recommendation, and I can see how that might provide an added level of a sense of security or safety for some parents, because you've got a person driving and a lot of kids, or a third of the kids on the bus. So again, I wanted to throw that out there. I'm not necessarily recommending it. I'm just saying it's one of many ideas.
Jason.
So Framingham cited bus monitors as one of the primary reasons why they're going remote for the first 2 months of their plan. So Framingham has not made it official because we're not supposed to make it official till August 10th, but already told their entire community. They're going remote for September and October. When they priced out bus monitors in their market, it was $27,000 a year per monitor. And the bus drivers, and I'm biased, I'm the son of 2 school bus drivers. Both my parents drove and even drove for Silver Lake. They can't do the job of monitoring mask usage, social distancing, and keeping their eyes on the road and keeping the children safe in that regard at the same time. It's just, it's too much to ask of them. You know, and that's another, I know they're subcontracted through First Student. They're not directly our employees, but I think of them as our employees, and I want to make sure that we're doing right by them as well. You know, I'm going to say this just to make sure, and I'm getting the feeling we're all on the same page. I am not going through this endeavor just for the sake of getting kids back into a building. I have 2 goals, and my 2 goals are to provide the highest quality education possible for our students and to provide safety for all of our community members, staff, students, and the greater community that they go home to every day and night. So $27,000 for a bus monitor is another wrinkle in the situation.
Okay. And so I'll just add to that. I agree. Those are my 2. That's the top tier. That's one top tier goal of those 2 things. And I don't think they're mutually exclusive, and I don't think they're necessarily competing with one another. They're both important and both necessary. From a funding standpoint, I think there's, you know, if we could do everything that we could do and money was no object, that would be wonderful, but that's not the point. That's not the case. I do think there are things that we can do where it only makes sense, and it would be derelict upon us not to, i.e. some of the stuff we're talking about with the HVAC and being able to make sure we have lots of fresh air. You know, if we get to the point where the transportation piece of it becomes such a problem, then we may have to say you have to drive your kids. You know, and only kids that have actual significant needs are going on the bus, and we have to reduce the number of kids on the bus. You know, and then you're assigned your seat, and based on when you get on the bus, and the first kid goes to the back of the bus and sits in seat 1, and so on and so forth. And we're going to do the best we can there. We're not adding another run of buses for $100,000. We're not adding 5 bus monitors for $100,000. It's just stuff that we can't do. If you want us to have the most we can do for the school, that's probably not the best place to put our money. It is better to put it into technology that we need to make the remote learning process better. Technology we need to keep people safe in school. Utility costs in order to keep people safe in school and be able to keep the school open, all right? So on that thought, Jill, as some of these notional numbers start showing up, if you could just shoot them to me, because I have a regular meeting with the town administrator, and I'm going to keep her very closely apprised. I have attended the selectmen's meeting, all but one selectmen's meeting since this stuff began, in order to be able to provide them with regular input about what's going on with the schools. And as we start getting even notional costs, I want to be able to share that in order to make sure that they can see what we're thinking about and understand what we may be asking of the town if we don't get reimbursement for it. And also because she's going to be, the town administrator is going to be closer to what's going on probably for the next phase of reimbursements of the CARES Act funding. That stuff helps to do that. I have no problem fighting for the money that we need to have in order to do this safely and appropriately. As long as it has, we see a good risk reduction benefit for the expense. And that doesn't mean that no expenses, anything goes, but there are certain things that I think make a lot of sense, and we should push them. And I know that doesn't make it necessarily easy for you, because Plimpton may want to do something different than one of the other towns, but that's how we have to look at it, and how I think we as a committee will continue to look at it.
Hey, John, Marshfield put a bus sign up, and if you didn't sign up, you're not on the bus. They just went through a straight bus sign up. That's what they're doing, and that information came from that chair of that committee. So I don't know if that's something to think about, because then you know who's going to be on the bus all the time and who's being dropped off and picked up. I don't know if that's something to think about.
Right. I think the one thing that's really important for us to remember is we need to build the plan, and then we need to see how we can actually implement it. And my guess is that some parts of the plan are going to adjust because we can't implement, right? So if we have 200, and that's the other thing, we have more students potentially this fall than we had last spring. So we have an additional quantity. But let's say we have 240 students split between 5 buses, and we can only do a third of those. That's 80 students. And if we have 100 that want bus rides, they can't have them. So we'll have to adjust as we see, as the facts come out, right? And if we have changes in who can come in from, who's going to be in school for teachers, that changes it too. So we're going to have to come up with the best plan, and then as we work to implement it, adjust the plan. Other things people want to speak to?
I just want to talk about the buses again, just the company itself. Ryan or Jill, you can answer this. Maybe you know it already. They're following the same guidelines. They will reach out to you if they know of any potential issues with staff.
Regarding if someone is symptomatic or suspected or has been close contact,
has been in contact with somebody that has tested positive. They're on board. They're at the same protocols.
So the bus company has sent us information regarding their cleaning protocols. I don't know if Christine has any information on reporting, but Again, for the most part with tracking and tracing in Massachusetts, and I think what we need to do is to get something in writing from them, their commitment to that kind of reporting. My understanding is that they would be, but again, I defer to Christine if she has heard something more or has something in writing from them.
I have had discussions with the bus company. We met just the other day, and that topic did not even come up. We haven't discussed that yet, but I know that this was the first of many discussions that we'll have.
Jesse just released the guidance on the protocol, Mike, about what happens if a case is found on the bus. I think, so it's clear there's a protocol for what should be done. I think a good follow-up for us is how do we make sure first student knows, and do they have any additions to it? Because we have it and it's in our plan, but it's a good question about to what extent do they know? So Desi's thought about it, but we have to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Thank you.
Anything else, folks?
I just appreciate the time knowing that you guys are still trying to throw everything together, meeting with us and bringing us up to speed. And also, I really appreciate how many of the suggestions we made to you last time we were together we're hearing in your plan. So thank you for listening to us, and we appreciate all the work you and your staff have put into this. And we look forward to seeing the final product, even if it's still a draft, before July 30th. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your support and your ideas, because that will help to make our plan even better and safer.
I'm just doing one thing here. I realized we should have a brief executive session tonight. It won't be long, but just brief. And I, of course, didn't send that out, so I'm sending that out right now. And I'm just making sure that I got everybody. Okay. So I just sent that to everyone's Gmail. Jill, certainly let me know by Friday if there's a need or desire to move the meeting on Monday, or because I could post it Monday morning. If we need to move it to Wednesday, we had, we didn't want to box things in there. But if you think if there's for whatever reason you think we need to wait till the 29th or the 29th to do this, then just give me a shout on Friday and we can cancel the meeting for Monday and post it for Wednesday.
So
it's we're scheduled for Monday.
Yes. So we anticipate being ready with a draft for Monday. The good news, I think, is that the commissioner also announced today that you don't need to vote it until the August submission. So that would allow us to present you with this preliminary plan for you to have time to think about it, and for us to have time to add more details to it before you officially vote it. The complication with moving it to Wednesday is that every night next week, as you can imagine, we need each of our districts to
So we'll leave it where it is. Since we don't have to vote it, then that's fine.
But
so
at the very least, we want to make sure our preliminary plan isn't so far off the mark that you don't even want us to submit it. I mean, that's our biggest fear, because we can work out the finer details, but we need that preliminary plan to at least meet your general expectations of where we're going.
Right. So we're good then for Monday, since we have that change of thing. Okay. Anything else for this piece of it? If not, then I would entertain a motion for executive session for the purpose of contract negotiations, and that's it. And then
are we going to return to announce, John?
I think we'll announce on Monday.
Okay. I make a motion for us to enter into executive session for the purposes of discussing contract negotiations with the Plimpton Teachers Association, only to return to regular session for the purposes of adjournment.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, so that's it. I'll take a motion to, no, we don't need a motion to adjourn because we already did that. So there we go. All right, folks, thank you. We'll have our next meeting, regular scheduled meeting on Monday at 6, and everybody should have a email with another Zoom link in your Gmail. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Bye-bye.